Good evening, mate.
I'm sorry. Good evening.
Good evening, Roy.
That was a good start to the night. How are you, Paul?
Third take. Absolutely. And this is how I start all my shows. It's just two friends talking about the beautiful game that is association football. And tonight, on a chapter of my life, I'm joined with my friend, or by my friend, Roy Cavanagh MBE, none other than.
Yeah, very, very good. I'm glad to be back, and it's always enjoyable. You have some great guests on, and I love listening to them, and I'm proud to be alongside some of them.
I was talking to one of my friends today who was born in Manchester and is a lover of Manchester United, and I said, I'm talking tonight to an aficionado of Manchester United. You are an encyclopedia of Manchester United. There is nothing that you don't know about Manchester United. You have actually forgot more than I will ever know about your fantastic football club. And we're going to be touching upon three of your books today. Harold Hardman, who I must admit I had never heard of until I received this wonderful book from you. From Meredith to Best, A Man of Football. Roy Cavanagh MBE and Carl Abbott. So we must talk about Carl, because Carl has been instrumental in books that you've written. And I know that Carl's instrumental in the latest book that you've written, at Manchester United, the 70s. And then the other one with the lovely cover of the babes, of the buses, with Docks 70. I'm assuming them are the colours of the Manchester buses that take you down to the docks.
No, those were and I'm very proud of it, because I'm a Salford man, and
right.
And those were the green Salford buses, and the Manchester buses were red. But those were the green Salford buses that took you down to Salford Docks, which is now Media City, which is this side of the Trafford Road swing bridge. Or it was a swing bridge, and then the other side of that, where United's ground is Manchester.
You have to excuse my ignorance, because being a Brummie and knowing quite a lot about Birmingham, I don't know much about Manchester. Is Salford in Manchester, or is Salford not a part of Manchester? How do Mancunians look at Salford? Because it is a city in its own right, isn't it?
Yeah, Salford is a city in its own right, and because I was born there 74 years ago now, a long time, and this rivalry, because we're a city, and Manchester is a city, with the changes in border regulations. Salford itself comes under a greater Manchester accommodation, like Birmingham, I assume, or the West Midlands, if you remember, which takes in, Greater Manchester will take in 10 different places like Bolton, Oldham, Rochdale, and Salford under the Greater Manchester banner. But as far as I'm concerned, and most Salfordians, Salford is its own city. Media City is in Salford, not Manchester. Where you got BBC and everything, but that is on the land or the water that were Salford docks.
Now, Salford, Manchester United is the closer team to Salford than Manchester City, isn't it? I'm trying to get my geography of Manchester in a correct order.
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah, I mean, Manchester United's ground literally was just over the bridge. Yeah. In fact, they've got a nice modern, well, not modern, but a much better bridge now because of the sheer volume of traffic. But in the 50s, it used to be, I don't know, you'll have seen it in Birmingham, but it literally was a road swing bridge. So the cars, and bear in mind, there weren't as many, was it, in the early 50s, mid-50s, would go over the bridge. But if a boat was coming up the canal, the bridge would get closed at both ends and would actually turn. And the bridge turned, and the boats would go through, carrying on their merry way up the canal. And then the bridge would turn back, gates would open, and people could walk over, or the cars could drive over.
How big was that canal? Because Birmingham is built, we've got more miles of canals than Venice. but you wouldn't know that in Birmingham. We've got a river, the River Ray, that goes down Derry 10, Digbeth in Birmingham. But our city isn't built on a river. We have no docks. We're landlocked in Birmingham. So for us Brummies, it's very difficult to understand the concept of swing bridges going over rivers and canals.
Well, of course, the river that goes under is the Manchester Ship Canal.
Yeah.
And that, of course, would have the dock entrance, but it would then go into tributes along the water. But that canal would then go out to the oceans eventually. So, yeah, I mean, I got stuck on the bridge. I can remember being stuck on the bridge once, going to a game against Leeds, 1957. So only about 10. And we was actually walking to the game, obviously, because I only lived 10 minutes walk away. And we got onto the bridge, and of course, there was no car. I mean, the bridge was covered with people just walking to the game. Yeah. And the siren went that there was a boat coming up the canal, and you could see the gate shutting at the far end where you were going to go through, and the gates were then shutting behind you. And it was eerie but there was a lot of people around you, and the bridge literally just turned slowly. Can you imagine it from right to your left, and then the boat went through, and then another siren went, slowly came back, gates were open, walked over and went to Old Trafford. I mean, it's an eerie experience.
It certainly is. And does the Manchester Grand Union Canal, does that go into the River Mersey? Because there is a canal there that does go to the River Mersey.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Because the closest football ground to the River Mersey is Stockport County, Edgeley Park, isn't it?
Right, yeah. Well, the canal where we're talking about, that used to be in Salford, would go out towards Warrington Way and then on towards Merseyside and out into the sea. Yeah, great times, and when an older person like me looks back on it, you have to say now that the Media City is an amazing concept. With the BBC and the theatre, the Lowry Theatre and the shops and the ITV, and it's just amazing,
And back then, when you got stuck on that bridge, you couldn't visualise Media City being there. Manchester has changed an awful lot. But in Harold Hardman's day, it was so different. A professional footballer that started plying his trade at the turn of the century, and we're not talking about this one, we're talking about the one before, in the 1900s, a former pro player at Everton, and also won an Olympic gold as well. So you tell me a little bit more about Harold, and how did you come about writing this book with Carl? Was it Carl nudging you, or was you nudging Carl? And a little bit about Carl Abbott and how you write your books. You're a bit like the Manchester equivalent of Lennon and McCartney.
Yeah, or Morecambe and Wise. Yeah, well, I'll come on to the concept of the Harold Hardman book first. Well, it was something I was always interested in, because I knew, when I said I knew him, I didn't meet him, but I knew of him because obviously my love for United, and he was their chairman. Yeah. And in my opinion, United have had three great chairmen. They started off with Davis, John Davis, who actually created the name Manchester United when he bought Newton Heath. And in 1902, a bit like was it Smalley for Birmingham?
It was Smalley Alliance. We turned into Birmingham City Birmingham, then Birmingham City after the Second World War.
Yeah. So 1878 was Newton Heath, and with the railways and everything. But then in 1902, they were in financial trouble. John Davis put his money in and thought, well, I'm going to change the title. And the title he settled on in the end was Manchester United Football Club. So since 1902. And Davis was chairman until about 1926, something like that. And then again, the club went into financial troubles in the mid-20s. And a man called James Gibson rescued them in the early 30s. And I mean rescued them. One Christmas, he put £2,000 into into the bank to save them literally for going bust because they didn't have enough money to pay the players' wages at Christmas. And Gibson then stabilised them again. Hardman had been on the board under Davis, and he was on the board under Gibson. Although Gibson did something most of us would have done. I wouldn't say sacked, but he moved all the people on the board when he took over to one side because he wanted to have a fair shot, because he wanted the people he knew and trusted. But within a year, he realised that Harold Hardman had so much gravitas, and by then Harold was very involved with the Central League. He was also involved with the Lancashire FA, so he had this gravitas, and of course he then had this amazing football career. And he was a qualified solicitor now with a practice in Manchester. So he soon brought Harold back. So Harold really from 1912 to 1965 was virtually on the board all along. And he became vice chairman. And when Gibson sadly died in 1951, Harold took over as chair. But going back to the beginning, I thought it's a really good story. And I think United have had three great chairmen, and those are the three. And I was thinking of writing about all three, and a brilliant man who was secretary called Walter Crickmar, who sadly died in the Munich air crash. And Crickmar had been at United since about 1921, and a couple of times in the 30s had actually even stepped in as a sort of a temporary manager when they got rid of managers and everything. And he ran the club off the pitch effectively. So I was cruising about whatever to do, and then I thought, no, Hardman himself had this. When you just jot down some of the things you've just mentioned there: FA Cup winner, Olympic goal winner, Manchester United chairman, and the subtitle to the book, of course, says "From Meredith to Best."
Yes.
He's a man who played alongside Billy Meredith, because he actually joined United, Harold, in 1908, because he'd moved then to Manchester. And Billy Meredith was the number 7. And he played against him when Meredith had played for Manchester City. And then when he sadly passed away, Harold, at the age of 83 in 1965, United had just won the league title, and Georgie Best was the number 7 in the team. So, it spans an amazing 65 years of football history, really.
And that number 7 is a really iconic shirt, isn't it, at Manchester United?
Mm. Very much so. Going back to Billy Meredith, there was a guy called Joe Spence in the 20s. Jimmy Delaney, a very, very good Scottish footballer, international. He was the number 7 when they won the Cup in 48. A brilliant number 7 who United signed from Birmingham, Johnny Berry. What a player he was. Oh, dear. A little outside right, but he was a good winger. Won 2 titles with United. And then, of course, Best debut, which was against West Bromwich Albion in 63. I remember going to the game, and he isn't actually on the original programme because Ian Moyer dropped out. So if you look at the team sheet on the original programme, it's got Moyer at 7, and Best was a team change. Best, of course, and he played at 7 in the European Cup final, but Best actually did play quite a lot of games at number 11 as well.
He did.
But Harold Hardman was a number 7 at United. I mean, when he was born, interestingly, he was actually born in Newton Heath, which was where the football club was. And there was so much grime and smog around in Manchester, as there was in every city, I assume, in the late 1800s. And all his life, he looked a very frail man, small, frail. And his family, his father was a solicitor. His family decided to move to the seaside to get some fresh air and help with his frailty, because otherwise he could have had serious health issues. And they went to live between Blackpool and Lytham St Anne's. His father was a solicitor. And Harold made his mind up. He wanted to be a solicitor, but he also wanted to be a footballer. And of course, he became good enough to play for Blackpool. actually playing in the first game Blackpool played at Bloomfield Road, which was in 1900. And he played 3 years. All his life, by the way, he was a strict amateur. And to younger people today, it's hard to imagine. And sometimes, Paul, when you stand back yourself and you think, what was bloody travel like in 1910 and places like that, and football team going from Birmingham to Newcastle or Manchester to London to play a game. What they're going on the train, and it's not like travelling first class like they would today or fly. I mean, you have teams nowadays. Teams will fly from Manchester to Leicester, fly from Manchester to Leicester, and Leicester likewise. Well, I mean, come on, and you think the size, the boots, and the state of the football pitches, the ball, the casey. I mean, it's incredible, really, if you take the time to think about football in those years, isn't it? And football is.
It's certainly changed beyond recognition. But when we're talking about change, it wasn't that long ago when I was a kid, and my first FA Cup final in colour was the 1972, and I had to go round to my aunts and uncles because we didn't have a colour TV. Now, my kids and my grandkids would look at that and you go, are you being serious? No, in modern times, things change so rapidly. You get these new phones, you get these new... the silicon chip has changed the world dramatically. Yeah. But back then, in Harold's day, and even back then when you were a kid and when I was a kid, it was a world that's very, very different to what it is now. So you can only imagine what travel was like back in those days. In fact, I think in '58 when Wales went to Brazil, I believe they travelled by boat. It was a different world, a totally different world. And I think it's very difficult to get our minds around how difficult and how much it has changed. Yeah,
but I think that comes to light early on in Harold's career when he was such a good player that Everton, came sniffing around because being an amateur, they came to an arrangement with Blackpool, but Harold was playing number 7 and wasn't getting paid. But you think he was living in the Blackpool area. And he was playing his football for Everton on Merseyside. Yeah. That's a fair journey. And then he's working and studying to be a solicitor. And what I found interesting was he actually immediately became one of the best outside rights in the game. That's number 7 to anyone who doesn't use the word out. But he played in 2 consecutive FA Cup finals. And when you read the story of those games, the first one was 1906, Everton and Newcastle at the Crystal Palace.
Yes.
Big grounds out at the outskirts of London that held just about 80,000. And the final against Newcastle, Everton won the game 1-0. And the Everton and Newcastle team, the Saturday night after the game, went into the West End and went to the theatre together. And they stayed overnight in London. And the Everton team went by bus to Brighton for the day and travelled back to Liverpool on the Monday. Yeah. It's incredible. The year after, they played... this is again younger people, like you mentioned there with Small Eastgate, with Birmingham. They played what you and I would call Sheffield Wednesday, but they were called the Wednesday.
The Wednesday Club, yeah. Mm.
I don't think they became Sheffield Wednesday till the mid-20s or something like that. But they were certainly called the Wednesday there, and Wednesday won that final 1-0. But doing the research on it, on the way to that final, in the semi-final, I can't remember. I think they either played Villa at Stoke or they played Stoke at Villa. I'm sorry, I just can't remember in the semi-final. But the semi-final was played on the Saturday, and it was a draw. On the Monday, Harold made his England debut against Wales at Liverpool, and Billy Meredith was in the Wales side. On the Wednesday was the replay of the semi-final. Yeah. So, they're playing semi-final Saturday, England Monday, semi-final on Wednesday. Yeah. And again, we've talked about travel and, the pitches and the boots and the balls, etc. It's mind-boggling to think about. And at a high level we're talking here. We're not talking like three lads in the park having a kick. We're talking here of the creme de la creme, really, in the English game.
Yeah, we're talking about elite football. You're talking about top-level football in this country. But even as late as 1971, when Chelsea drew in Athens against Real Madrid, they didn't know what to do. It was a draw. When we're going to play, so they played the game on the Wednesday, had the Thursday off, and then they played the replay on the Friday. I mean, a lot of the Chelsea players, Dave Sexton said, "Look, just do what you usually do on a Thursday." So Osgood, Charlie Cook, and Tommy Baldwin, they all went for a drink. It's like kids of today I don't think they can really understand what our footballers of yesteryear did. And you know what? They were bloody brilliant as well.
Did Alan Hudson play in that final?
He played in both, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a good player. I mean, I've just got his book, Hoodie. I've not started it yet, but I've just got his book. But I mean, Osgood was. I know we're digressing, but I saw Osgood, and before he broke his leg. Yes. He was a good player after he broke his leg, but before he broke his leg, I'll tell you, 19, he was a magnificent centre forward. Really good, and a good side Chelsea then.
Oh, absolutely. The stories that Alan, I'm literally on that day. Uddy had, in the first game, he got a bit of a dead leg, and he was walking off. Went to look at a flea market, and he got a taxi back. And as they was going round, he seen the Athens Hilton, and he said to the taxi driver, "Just drop off here. I'll have a look at the Hilton." And as he walked through, and he went towards the swimming pool, he said, "Paul, I've never seen so much alcohol on the table." There was 3 Chelsea players and Johnny Fennell, one of their mates, and Uddy went over to Oz. He says, "Oz, you do realise that we didn't win last night. We're playing them tomorrow," And Oz said, "Ud, Younggood," because that's what they used to call him, Ud Younggood. He said, "Son, you go home and get an early night because you're going to do all my running tomorrow, and I'm going to score." And Osgood always done that. The stories that Uddy tells of Oz are phenomenal. But, again, that's what football was like back in those days. The kids today don't understand what football was like in our day.
I had the pleasure of hosting Osgood at sports dinners, and he had some incredible stories. And I think one of them was, I'm going to get my facts because I'm just thinking off the top of my head now. But it was one where he scored a goal, which was, say, his 100th goal or something. It was a big goal for Chelsea. And all the crowd, and he thought they were applauding him. But evidently, Raquel Welch was at the match. And the rest of his team didn't bother coming to him as the whistle had just gone. They all went running off because Raquel Welch was going to come and visit him in the dressing room. And there's Osgood thinking, bloody hell, I've just scored this winning goal and got my 100th goal and I'm not the centre of attraction. So it was interesting to be with, I can tell you that.
Hoodie always reminded us that he did fail with Raquel. And he always ribs him. And then when Reeve didn't pick us in the 80, when he had that, and that was in Manchester, wasn't he? Had that gathering of England's finest 80 players, and Uddy always used to introduce us as the 81st best player in England. I mean, them two boys have got some stories, and they were great mates. And you're absolutely right. Osgood was one of the greatest central strikers that we've ever seen.
Staying with London, by 1908, the Olympic Games, they should have been played, they should have been held rather in Rome, but Mount Vesuvius had erupted or was erupting. And the 1908 games were switched to London. And the football wasn't a big competition, but it was played in late October. And Harold played in the England team, and they won the gold medal. So by 1908, he'd also qualified as a solicitor, and he actually opened his own practice in Manchester. So, and he got married, I think 1909, 1910. So he actually moved to Manchester by then, and that's when he played a couple of games, 3 or 4 games for United. And by 1912, he was invited to join the board of United. And as I said, right through to 1965, he was on the board, except for about 12, 14 months. But the times in the 20s and 30s, I mean, United were a yo-yo side. They dropped between, they must have dropped down about 3 times. They came straight back. But there was one game, one of 1933, 34, something like that. They actually had a game against Millwall at the bottom of the 2nd division, and the game was at Millwall, and the team that lost got relegated to the 3rd division, and United won at Millwall 2-0, so stayed up. But money was tight. But, Harold's influence then came to the fore, and Gibson, of course, made him vice chairman, and Harold was there when they signed Matt Busby in 45, and then this youth revolution was coming with the Busby Babes, but Busby had created a very, very good side, an older side, of course, because the likes of Johnny Carey, Jack Rowley, Stan Pearson, Jimmy Delaney, they'd had 6 years took out of the life with the war, 6-7 years. And by 48, it was a very mature, very good side. And a week before the final, Gibson, who'd done so much as a chairman for Manchester United, suffered a stroke. Mm-hmm. And Harold Hardman actually represented United as their chairman in the Royal Box in the 1948 Cup final. And Gibson never really got over this illness, and sadly died in September 51 when Johnny Berry joined United, by the way. And Harold became the chairman. And those next, the next 14 years, you could have wrote a book just about them 14 years, because if you think in them 14 years, and I'm sure we'll discuss some of them, but they won the title in 52. The Busby Bays won the title in 56, 57. The Munich air crash came in 58. The club was desolate, really, and Harold was the chairman, so he was the lead. He's on the front of that famous programme against Sheffield Wednesday, the first game after Munich, where it just says United will go on, and it's a message signed by Harold Hardman, the chairman. And then the likes of Law came, 62, 63. They won the FA Cup, 63. Harold was back in the Royal Box. But his health was declining by then. But he was still officially chair. And they won the league in April 65. And Harold sadly passed away in June 65. But those 14 years threw up a series of events that you could nearly write a book about each of those events. I mean, the one that I think's really, really historic is the fact that we go back to Chelsea. Chelsea won the league in 55, and should have gone into the very first European Cup, which was going to be the 55-56 season. And Alan Hardacre at the Football League no, you're not going in. We don't need to be playing against the foreigners. We're England. We're the cradle of football. And Chelsea acceded to that. They didn't enter. But Busby had seen what Hungary had done to England twice. A lot of people, well, I think everyone who knows a bit about football knew that England got beat 6-3 at home to Hungary. They conveniently forget that they went to Hungary the following May and got beat got beat 7-1. Gil Merritt played in both games, I think.
Yeah, did.
Yeah, and got beat 7-1 in Budapest. And Busby thought that his young players needed to be exposed to this rising, the different football that the Continentals were playing. So, I mean, the story, of course, Hardacre then said to United, he won the 56 title. Well, Chelsea couldn't play last year, you're not playing. And Busby was adamant they were going to play. And this is where Hardman's solicitor and law came in, and the two of them, Busby and Hardman, had a really good ally in Sir Stanley Rouse.
Yeah.
Because Stanley Rouse was the Football Association, and Stanley Rouse had asked Matt Busby to manage the Great Britain Olympic team of 1948, and they were good. They were good friends, and Hardman and Sir Stanley Rouse were very good friends. And Stanley Rouse came up and said to Hardacre, well, the Football League jurisdiction is, because in those days there was not midweek football. There was at Christmas and Easter, but you didn't get midweek games really in the 50s. You played Saturday.
Yeah, you never had no floodlights.
No, absolutely. Sorry, absolutely. And you get the odd replay in games like that. That'd be played Wednesday, but there was no real midweek football. And he told Hardacre that the Football League's authority only counted to the games under their jurisdiction. And as the European games were going to be played midweek, that didn't really fall under the Football League's jurisdiction unless, and this is vital when you get to 1958, unless it affected United playing a fixture on the Saturday.
Yeah.
So United entered the 1956-67 European Cup, and obviously they did very well. They got to the semi-final, and then he came to the 57-8 season, and then Munich came, and imagine him being the chairman of a club whose Duncan died a couple of weeks after the crash, of course, but 7 got killed on the day. Duncan died a couple of weeks after. So you lose 8 players. 2 others, including Johnny Berry, would never play again. Yeah. You've lost 10 players. 5 others are in hospital. That's 15 players of the 22 who will have played in the first and second team the Saturday before. Yeah. It doesn't leave much focus on fulfilling fixtures, does it? When you think about it, it's all right saying you've got Johnny Giles and Shea Brennan and Nobby Stiles, the likes of those, Alec Dawson, Mark Pearson, really good footballers who would push forward. But all of them footballers would push much further forward than their age warranted as well. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So fancy being the chairman of a club like that. No money. Players weren't insured, don't forget, because why would you insure someone, who's going on an airplane? They weren't insured. And United were really in the mire, again, financially, which is where Harold's remembrance of what it was like before Gibson had took over 25 years earlier, and his steadiness would come in handy.
It's quite incredible, really, how United have, again, for the modern football fan, we hate United. They've got all the money and they're the biggest club. Yeah. But if you know your history, Manchester United have earned the right to be where they are. They've had years of struggle. They've had the Munich air disaster. They've had a chairman that led them through those choppy waters. Busby was a former Manchester City captain and Liverpool player, and it was a toss of a coin whether Busby was going to stay on at Liverpool or join Manchester United. United have done the hard miles. They've done that hard slog. So, for anybody really that understands football, United are where they are because they've had fantastic management. They've developed their football club over the years, and what you see today is what you should see. They are a fantastic football club, and you know what? every other football club in this country had the same opportunity as Manchester United. It's just that Manchester United did it and the others didn't.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea had the opportunity to go into Europe for the first club in England.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just imagine, just say United had acceded to that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, when would an English club, because Wolves, I think, would be the next one, but when would an English club have gone into Europe? Do you understand? And,
but then it was the arrogance of the English, wasn't it? Because we didn't enter any of the FIFA World Cups. Because it was like, we are the world's greatest nation. We don't need to enter a competition. Do you know what? We actually might fail and we might be proved not to be number one. So rather than do that, we decided not to enter. And it was only until, as I say, the 50s that England decided to join FIFA and play in the World Cup. Again, the arrogance of the English, the Hungarians taught us a lesson, but we don't actually learn from these lessons, because Jimmy Hogan was very instrumental as one of the coaches that went out there and taught the Europeans how to play football, and then it come back and bit us on the bum in the 50s.
Yeah. Did he go to Ajax? Was he involved with Ajax? Or there was a couple of...
Jimmy was involved just about everywhere. He wasn't involved in Ajax, but he certainly was involved in Dutch football. He was certainly involved in German football in the School of Dresden. In fact, the year that Jimmy died, 1974, was the World Cup final of Germany and, West Germany at that time, and Holland. And the head of the Federation of German Football wrote a letter to Jimmy Hogan's son saying that we knew nothing about football until Jimmy showed us how to play. And the Dutch were very similar, because he went in, in the early 1900s, and when he was playing for Bolton Wanderers, they played a Dutch team. They smashed the Dutch team, and he did promise that one of the days he'd come back and teach the Dutch how to play football. And the first time that Holland beat Germany, Jimmy Hogan was the coach of that infamous game, and he was certainly with Hugo Meisel involved in the Austrian football. He was there with when he was in the First World War, and he was interned, and then he was moved to MTK in Hungary. So Jimmy pretty much taught Europe how to play football.
Yeah, of course, that 1974 final, I can remember it. That was the first minute penalty given by, was it the Wolverhampton butcher?
Jack Taylor. Yeah, Jack Taylor, yeah.
First minute of the World Cup final, no problem, penalty against the home side as well.
And it was a delayed kick-off as well, Roy.
Right.
It was delayed because the corner flags wasn't in position. So they delayed the World Cup final because the corner flags wasn't in. You can't start the game without your corner flags.
But the money problems that you were just mentioning there and highlighted, of course, it raised a little bit of conflict between Matt and Harold, because Harold was very parsimonious. He was a Methodist anyhow, and he knew where that money had to be earned and saved, and etc. And of course, after the crash, Matt wanted a guiding light. They actually wanted law, but they missed out on law. He went to City, and they actually signed Albert Quicksaw, who cost them $45,000, which was a record fee. Now, with the greatest will in the world, Albert was probably worth about $35,000. But the story went that Sheffield Wednesday added $5,000 per player for David Pegg and Mark Jones, who they believe United had pinched from under their noses. One came from Doncaster, one from Barnsley. And the fee became $45,000, and Matt wanted him. But Harold said, no, that's far too expensive, and we'll just carry on breeding our own players, and we'll just have to wait and whatever. But Louis Edwards had then joined the board after the crash, and he put money into it then, and they signed Quicksaw. And then about 2 or 3 years after, Law became available. Now, Busby, remember, had given Dennis Law his Scottish debut when he was, because Busby was manager of Scotland for he was made manager of Scotland a month before the Munich air crash, the official manager. And, of course, he wasn't fit to take them to the World Cup in Sweden that you'd mentioned in 58. But the start of the 58-9 season, he took the team for a couple of games and he gave Dennis Law his international debut. And then Matt realised then that his health, if United had to come first. But Law he wanted very much, but the Italians wanted 115,000 for him. And again, Harold said, "Whoa, hang on a minute, 115,000. We just got to the semi-final last year. They got well beat by Tottenham. But we've got, Bobby Charlton's here, Harry Gregg's still here, Billy Folks, and we've got young players are coming through, Nobby, Johnny Giles. We've got to carry on with this." But again, Edwards was the man behind that, in fairness, that provided the fee to bring Dennis Law. In my opinion, tomorrow might change or add an addition to this, by the way. But in my opinion, Dennis Law is possibly, very, very possibly, the greatest ever signing by Manchester United. Cantona is the other one for the influence that he had with the younger players as well, but also his own performance. But Law, the signing was a massive catalyst, and they won the Cup in 63. And of course, Harold by then was 81, but was in the Royal Box again as the United chairman to see them win. And of course, the year after, Georgie Best suddenly appeared, and they were blooming, and the investment was right. Interestingly, in doing the research and looking back in the programmes, there was another connection with Birmingham, because Edwards and Busby went to Warwickshire Cricket Club because they were one of the first clubs to start like a lottery type club.
Yeah, pulsing, didn't they? Yeah.
And there was a guy called Bill Burke was involved there. I'm not sure if there was boxes. I know Salford Racecourse, because Salford had its own racecourse until 1963.
Right.
And they had because the November Handicap used to be held there every year.
Larry Silkman tells a great story about that.
But they'd all, Salford Racecourse had put some hospitality boxes, which for 1963 were unheard of. And Edwards and Busby, they created it, and they got Bill Burt to come from Warwickshire Cricket Club, and he started the lottery at United in 1964. So again, it was the full turn, but Harold, I mean, what a story that, from Meredith to Best. I mean, bloody hell, it's just incredible. It's mind-boggling, really.
Oh, it certainly is, and a wonderful history and a wonderful person, and has left an indelible mark on Manchester United.
Yeah.
Dennis Law, though, I would argue, and I know where you're coming from with Ronaldo coming back. The king has come back to Old Trafford, but
yes.
I don't know. In modern times, we look at these players and you go Messi and Ronaldo, who's the best? Well, I'm not interested, because I think they're both world class. I think they're both great players.
Yeah.
And I think if you're looking at, players that have gone before, then they must be up there with the likes of Puskas and Pele and Georgie Best and all the rest of them. But Dennis Law certainly must. And I think with players like Dennis Law, they don't seem to be as revered as some of the others. Dennis has got to be up there with the all-time greats, and to this day, Dennis is known as the king of Old Trafford, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you what is really interesting. I'd certainly, if I was a Scotsman, I'm tempted anyhow, but if I was a Scotsman, if you look at that Scotland team from around 60, from about 61. I know Jimmy McCalliog, a great player, played for a few clubs, but he made his mark everywhere he went. Yeah. But Jimmy McCalliog, but I mean, Jimmy, they look at the Scotland side, the Achilles heel was a goalkeeper, of course, was always the goalkeeper. But in my time, they had fullbacks like Eric Caldwell, who was a magnificent right back, John Gregg. Your wing half, you had Dave Mackay. What a player, Dave Mackay. Oh, Jimmy Baxter. Oh my goodness! Now there is a showman, and they always had wingers. I mean, Willie Henderson at Rangers, Jinky Johnson. Oh, Jimmy Johnson, what a winger! McNally, Dennis Law, Gilzine, Ian St John, Ronnie Yates, centre half, Paddy Creran. I'm sorry for anyone I've missed out. John White, the ghost, what a player he was, who tragically got killed when he got struck by lightning. But you know, these magnificent footballers Scotland had,
and Dennis, Bobby Murdoch as well.
The Lisbon Lions, you know,
Billy McNeil.
But Dennis, throughout that, from about 62 to, well, in fact, he played in the 74 World Cup that we spoke about. But from 62, when Dalglish was on the scene, you know, but Dennis was the revered man. He was that good. He was the man, and a magnificent footballer. I can tell you that anyone who knows the Manchester United history will not have a word. They know that he was, and he is their king, and an absolutely top guy as well, by the way. But a magnificent footballer. McCallion, I'm looking forward to this book when it comes out. A little story there. I went to the England-Scotland game in 67.
Right, okay.
When I went to the 65 game and I went to the 67 game at Wembley, and McCallion played in that game for Scotland, and I had a really good game. Scotland won it 3-2, and of course they then said, you know, we are the world champions, if you remember. About it, but and McCallion, of course, came to United, and I think if Tommy Dockett had managed to sign him, you know, a month earlier from Wolves, he just might have saved them from going down, because he did transform them. The thing is, in a bizarre way, and you're kicking yourself for even saying this, but in a way, the relegation turned out to be a catalyst for United, didn't it? Because, you know, it may have been that it brought them back, if you get what I mean, quicker than it would have done if they'd survived relegation. By that I mean, if they'd survived relegation, they might have still been plunking around in the 14-15 slot, whereas going down and then coming straight back with the younger players, they blossomed straight away, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. And going back to Dennis, in 1963, he scored goals in 3 different games against Gordon Banks at Wembley, didn't he? In the final of the FA Cup, he played England versus Scotland, and of course played for the rest of the world. That's how good Dennis Law was. Played for the rest of the world, and I do think that when we do look back, Dennis is one of those that does get missed off the list.
And scored. I think they won.
Absolutely scored. He scored in all 3 games against Banksy, which no other player has ever done. Wembley Wins, Wembley Woes is the autobiography of Jim McCallion. I had the pleasure of Jim's company. I went and saw Jim. He's on a book tour at the moment, and I went down into the Black Country, a Brummie into the Black Country, and met up with him. What a fantastic man. Loved his time at United. And you're right, it was in that game that City beat United, and it was Dennis's backheel goal that gave City a 1-0 win at Old Trafford. 87 minutes, the game was never finished. But when they went off the pitch and into the dressing rooms, Jim says to me, have a guess who was sitting in our dressing room, and it was Dennis.
I know he walked into the room. He just walked in the mate. He backheeled the goal. I was there behind that goal. He backheeled it, and he just turned around and walked to the centre circle and walked up the tunnel. He looked in a daze, and he went into the United dressing room. And you're right, as Jimmy would say there, as the United team trooped in, he was sat there, but Dennis Law.
He was in tears because he knew that goal ultimately had relegated United, and he absolutely loved United. And then Tommy Docherty walked in there, and Jim said, "Oh my God, it's going to go off here." But Tommy was great to Dennis as well. And Jim said we had a bit of a cuddle, and that was it. But what a lovely man. And Dennis has wrote the foreword to Jim's book. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it. And who stayed up that season, by the way, Paul?
Birmingham City did, mate. We stayed up last game of the season. We beat Norwich 2-1 at St Andrews. Yeah, I remember. We done a lap of honour, and I remember saying to my dad, "Why are we doing a lap of honour? We've just stayed up." But that's as it was at Birmingham. You know, when you look at the two cities, and you look at the cities in this country, obviously you've got London, which is in a different stratosphere, and then you've got Leeds by numbers of population. Leeds is the second, and then Birmingham's the second, Leeds is the third, and then I think comes Manchester, then Liverpool, and one or two others. But you look at some of the fantastic football teams and the fantastic players that have come through those big sides, and you look at my team and my city, Birmingham, we don't even scratch the surface. When we talk about us being a big club, we really are having a laugh and trying to kid ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, you know, from an outside, you know, as I say, I've been watching football since '54, and obviously Villa, I've got that aura because of the double in the century before that, which is now two. But then the Wolves, of course, that old gold shirt and that Billy Wright's team and Cullis's team, West Brom. Even West Brom get, in a way, more kudos than Birmingham, don't they? Really, with success-wise, and it is surprising that. Is it because it's too many?
I just think it's the fact that when you look at football and you look at how fantastic Manchester United's management has been, and I don't mean, you know, management of players on the pitch. I'm looking at the management of the club. And then when you look at my team, Birmingham City, we are the polar opposite to what you are and what you have been, where you've had brilliant management and the foresight to look forward and take United to be where they are. Birmingham City have always had, the only thing in our trophy cabinet is a loaded gun, and we've always shot ourselves in the foot. That is Birmingham City. We would bugger up anything better than anybody else, and we just made so many bad decisions. We are where we are, but we are the second biggest city in the country, and it's quite incredible how we have been so unsuccessful, and you guys in Manchester have always been so very successful. And so our local rivals, Aston Villa.
I've just funny enough, I've just done a small booklet with a couple of Preston fans about Alec Dawson, a guy called Alec Dawson, who played for United and then went to play for Preston successfully, and then he went to Brighton and Brentford. And it occurred to me then to mention it to you because when he went to Brighton, the manager there was Freddie Goodwin. And Freddie Goodwin had played for United, of course, before the air crash, and then after the crash he took over your dad's favourite player. He became the number 4 because he was Eddie Coleman's understudy. But he was a good cricketer, was Freddie Goodwin, and he was also Brian Statham's understudy at Lancashire. But he was quite a successful manager. Was Fred Goodwin, and I think he did very well in America.
I think there's a fantastic story about Freddie in A Time of My Life, which is a wonderful book that you've also written. I didn't realise that you were good mates with Frank Hayes, the cricketer, as well. And another book that you wrote, The Salford Lad, Snake Hips. And you're right, he was my dad's favourite player. But Freddie, again, a Busby babe, and also played for Lancashire at cricket. And the lovely thing about your book is it's a love of football and cricket as well. And it just takes you through a journey of those times in Manchester through the eyes of you growing up, loving for both football and cricket.
Yeah, I've literally done, my idea on that was, it still had my memory from 1954 to 1966, 7 to 19, you know, out growing up. And of course now Barbara, my wife, and myself are lucky we've got 2 lovely sons. who themselves. We've got 3 lovely grandchildren, and we've got 4 great-grandchildren who are fantastic to be around. And I thought, I'll write this. And I've only done 40 copies of it, and there's no price on it. I've not published it, but I sent you a copy. I'd give it to my family and, some close friends as I see them. And I just wonder whether but at times, seriously, you think, oh, no, finger in the mouth, it's just whatever. But, I'm still half tempted to put it on the market and see. But at the minute, I'm not doing. But because we've got this 70s book, which I promised I would tell you about. The good news is, all I would say on this, and I know others have done bigger and whatever, but there's 420 pages in this.
Yep.
And there's 100 glossy coloured pictures. But there's a lot of statistics in it as well. And, it is every single United game in the 70s that's got a minimum of 100-word match report. Then all the reserve games are flagged up with the team, the youth team. Every player's got a bio and a coloured picture of them, and then you've got their stats, career, the full career stats, and the checking is like, oh my goodness, it's mind blowing. Little things like the spelling of Hillsborough, and because Middlesbrough, which to a northern lad like me sounds the same as Hillsborough, Middlesbrough is Brough.
Yeah.
But Hillsborough is Bourgh. The number of times I spotted it, and then we had to alter that, and everything. But finally, the button's been pushed on it now, and it is at the printers, I'm assured. And I'd be amazed if, where are we now? I'd be amazed that by the end of September, it's not there, and it's the Manchester United book of the 70s, which again, Carl, I'll come to Carl on that, because I know we're going to come on, hopefully, your kind offer. Dave Lane, the publisher, Dave, I think that you met Dave, have you?
I've spoken to Dave, yeah, I've spoken to him.
Yeah, he's a good lad. Yeah. And Carl and myself will be delighted to come on when it actually is available and people can go and buy it then, as opposed to saying, like now, oh, it's coming out in a fortnight's time and whatever. We might as well wait till it's done. So as soon as I get my hands on my copy, I will be giving you a ring. Is that okay?
That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Anyone, by the way, who wants the Harold Hardman book, that is on Amazon. And if you just put Roy Cavanagh on Amazon, it'll list up the various books, and the Harold Hardman book is on there, and you've got a copy yourself, and I think it's one for someone who's fancies looking at the history from 1900 to 1965 of football life, and trying to imagine what it was like.
So the thing is, I love football. That may come across, and I also love the football history, and I might be a Birmingham City supporter, and my team will be kicking off shortly. Troy, I don't know what he's putting a jacket on for. It looks as though he's on bloody subs bench. I don't know what's going on there, but he's bound to come off the bench, and score the winner, Troy.
Yeah,
but
he might be. He might be the Dennis. He might be the catalyst. He's just that. I know what you say, and it's gone on a long, long time. But hey, it just needs that break. It needs that look. Everyone needs look in life, anyhow. And that catalyst. And who knows? As long as when it does start to succeed, that they do build on it and not throw it away.
I tell you what, when you're talking about building, we need to build our ground because it's in a state of disrepair, and there's only half of it open, which is quite embarrassing. But I love to talk about all football clubs. I love to read about all football clubs and different football fans and their journey and their passion. And I've been accused many times of being an Aston Villa supporter because I have such a respect for Aston Villa. And what come across in your A Time of My Life book is your respect for Manchester City as well. And I didn't realise how good Manchester City were in the 50s. You know, I've listened to Birmingham City supporters saying, we were a good team in the 50s, we should have won more. And I'm thinking, well, hang on a bit, you had Manchester City that were a damn good team. You had Newcastle United that were a damn good team. You had Wolverhampton Wanderers that were a bloody good football team. And you had West Bromwich Albion. And you had a number of other teams, including Preston with the, Tom Finney, the Preston plumber, and Blackpool as well. So, I mean, there was a lot of other good teams as well as Birmingham City in the 50s. But I was amazed how good City were.
Yeah, well, again, younger people will not get what I'm going to say now, but I'm going to say it. I mean, in those days, because you had no Sky TV, and you had no Talk Sport, so on a Saturday, you either watched your first team or your reserves, or where I lived, I could just go over that same bridge, and instead of turning right for Old Trafford, I could get the number 53 bus, which in 15 minutes would have me at Main Road. And, if you wanted to watch First Division football, I could do that. But, and people used to go watch one team and then the other until probably the late 60s, really, when when things came about. But I mean, and the cup finals, like you mentioned there, 72. I mean, my first final was 54, which was West Brom and Preston. But 55 was City against against Newcastle. 56 was City and Birmingham. And then United and Villa and United and Bolton. So, the cup final, and City were a good cup side, and United was still my side as well. But I hope Birmingham succeed for you, mate. And thank you for this invite again tonight. It's a real pleasure to be alongside you, and hopefully this 70s book will appear in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And let me just finish, if you don't mind, with Carl Abbott. Carl and I met work-wise because I was involved in a major construction company, and Carl became a professor at Salford University. And we love helping younger people succeed in life, and he's been that he's been that link. So I don't mind. Love writing the book, but turning my writing into a book. Carl's got that expertise of turning the words into the pages and inserting the pictures and making sure the page numbers are correct, making sure little things like at the top of the page that the titles are right, and making sure the chapters are right. And if you put chapter 4 is on page 22, it is on page 22. Acknowledgements, dedication, and turning it into a book. And we got together about 5 years ago. And since then, we've done the Harold Hardman book, Johnny Carey, United in the 60s. And, we've got together on this in the 70s. So, he's a vital part of it. And hopefully he will join me and David if you wish to extend the invite again when this other one comes out. But it's always lovely to speak to you, Paul, and great work you do and great guests that you have on. Well, I'm just delighted to be here.
I purposely didn't particularly want to go down the 70s route today with you for one reason. I can get you back and we can talk at length about Manchester United in the 70s because there were some fantastic stories, some fantastic players. And your book of the 50s, A Time of My Life, I would definitely think about publishing that because I've started reading it. I get so many books and I read the books and then I do the podcast. So I read lots of half books, a little bit like films. I watch a film and I half watch a film because I fall asleep. and I watch certain games of football. And I'll probably watch Birmingham's and fall asleep watching my team Birmingham tonight because there's only a certain amount of hours that my eyes physically stay awake. And I just love doing the podcast and talking to people. And I prefer to talk to them about their love than me reading something. Although I do like to read it because you get a good idea of what's going on and how the writer's written it and getting the juices of what the book is about. But for me, my podcasts are all about the people that I engage with, and they tell me what they're doing, and that's the beautiful thing about the podcast and why I love them so much. So, Time of My Life is a fantastic book, and I would get it published because, I just think it's fantastic. Other books that you have published, that you have referenced, how can fans, and not just Manchester United fans, but generic football fans, how can they buy these books? Are they all still out there, or are some sold out?
Quite a lot are out there. Some have been sold out. The ones that are privately published, for example. You might do 200, 400 reprint, do another 200, 400. But quite a lot of them are actually on Amazon. So if you just put Roy Cavanagh, Cavanagh, spell it K, but it's Roy Cavanagh. Just put Roy Cavanagh books on Amazon. It'll give you the latest list. A really sad scenario because, of course, we get into the disaster in the tragedies in New York, and I can remember vividly where I was on the 11th of September. When that terrible thing happened with the Twin Towers. I'd done a book on Dennis Filer, and actually the English time 2:00, and this was a very successful book, if I say so myself. It came number 2 in the Times bestsellers, behind a book called Seabiscuit about the famous horse.
Yeah, so I've talked to Alan Hudson about Seabiscuit. What a horse that was. We did a podcast about Seabiscuit.
Yeah, which they turned into a film, of course. But Violet was number 2, and the day it was published, I'd gone to get some pre-published copies, and I came out of the publishers, and I can remember it now, I got in my car, English time, about 2:00.
Yeah.
And the news bulletin was reporting, because I think New York was 9:00. We were 5 hours difference, and the disaster of that day was unfolding. So, Paul, great to be alongside you. I'm honoured to be asked to be on, and it's always a pleasure. I must come and see you when I'm in the Birmingham area. Although the bloody one-way systems in Birmingham, I think I might stop at Dudley and we'll meet up somewhere. All right.
Oh, the Dudley or Alzo, the ring roads aren't as bad. We can negotiate around there. All right. Yeah. Might even come up to see a game with you at Old Trafford.
No, well, yeah. Hey, tickets have gone through the roof, of course.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, I've heard some unbelievable. I mean, I was told a story today. I'm not going to name names on the phone. A guy today.
Yeah.
Who has 3 season tickets at United.
Yeah.
He was offered by a tout the other day, 200 quid a ticket, by a tout. And he's got a young kid, and he sold all 3 tickets, 600 quid. I mean, call it all you want, but I mean, you've got to be in that position, haven't you? You've got a wife, and you've got a young child, and someone offering you 600 quid for 3 tickets for a game against Newcastle United, you aren't being disrespectful. Bloody hell! Yeah. But it's going to break records, I think, tomorrow with prices. I mean, do you see today the shirts? £187 million in shirts already.
Isn't it? And Jack Grealish, of course, is second in shirt sales as well across the city.
Hey,
so Manchester's the epicentre, isn't it? Again.
I thought he played well on Wednesday. I thought he was an instigator on Wednesday for England.
Well, I mean, I've been saying for years, I think Jack Grealish is the finest English player that we have. Yeah. I've took so much stick. I've got a lot less followers and friends on Facebook and Twitter these days, and I've had to block hundreds of Birmingham City fans. Yeah. I've never received a death threat, but it's been quite close for my love of Jack Grealish.
I was told he was a United fan when he was a young lad.
I believe he did like United. His dad's a mad Villa supporter, but again, when you watch the games on the TV and you watch the Premier League, you look at teams and you might not necessarily support them, but you enjoy watching them, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, if you're a winger and you see someone like Giggs in his pomp, you think, I want to be like Ryan Giggs or whatever. Or Trevor Francis, of course, in his time.
Well, absolutely. And Jack isn't a winger, he's a midfield player, but they keep playing him out on that left-hand side. And I just wish that they'd play him more centrally, and I'm hoping that Pep will, because you get Jack on the ball in that final third, running at defenders in a more central position, and I think that's where he hurts teams more. But, what do I know? I'm a Birmingham City fan.
I think that's an interesting question to ask the experts. I mean, for example, both United and England play with two defensive midfielders.
Yeah, I never would.
And you think, well, hang on, England, you've got the choice of everybody. Manchester United has got a very fair choice, to say the least.
Yep.
Why don't you think, we're going to win 4-3? I just don't get it. I mean, if you unleash, for example, this is top of my head, but you've got Greenwood, you've got Cavani, you've got Ronaldo, you've got Fernandes to start with, you've got Pogba going forward.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've not got duffers at the back. I mean, Maguire, you've got Shaw, you've got a goalkeeper, De Gea. Lindelof is a good player in his own right. You've now got Varane if someone can score 3 goals against them, why not you pushing them back and score 4 against them? And the same with England. You look at it and you think, you've got enough players there to have a decent back four and a goalkeeper, and perhaps one defensive midfielder, probably Rice. But, go on the front foot and unleash these attacking inside, what you and I would call the old-fashioned inside forwards, and have 2 wingers and leave Kane at centre forward. You think, I don't know. But we're not managers, are we?
I wish we were, because if I was a manager, I'd be playing last man back. I'd be playing rush goalkeeper. I would be playing on the front foot with all them forward players. I'd be putting them on there, and I wouldn't be worried about losing the ball. When we lose the ball, we win the ball back. But what we're doing, we're playing football, and we're going to try and score more goals than you. That little fella that we've got on loan from United.
Oh, yeah, Chong.
Yeah, he just got a bit of a whacking. But he looks a decent player, and I've heard so many great reports of him, and another future Manchester United superstar in the making there.
Mm. Of course, the one of the top ones, and his lifestyle got waylaid. But is this Morrison, who's at Derby?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
when he was in the youth team that had Pogba and Lingard in it, they were bit players.
Yeah.
To this game. Bit players, and bloody hell, it's just shows you that's where the word luck comes into it, Paul.
It does, but I do think you make your own luck, and I do think that if you play on the front foot, that you're gonna, get more chances, and get more chances, you're gonna score more goals. But guys, can I also just, if you want to get hold of Roy on Twitter, it's at Roy MBE, and Roy Cavanagh on Facebook. So, sir, can I thank you so much? We will reconvene in a few weeks' time to talk about your 1970s book on the greatest club side in the world, Manchester United.
Thanks very much. Love to speak to you again. Take care.
Cheers, pal. God bless. Thank you. And thanks for listening, guys. Ta-ra, bye-bye. Bye-bye.